What if I told you that from your own perspective, you might never actually experience death? Not in a poetic sense, not as a metaphor, but in the cold, unsettling logic of quantum mechanics. A claim so radical that if it's true, it means your consciousness could continue indefinitely, leaping from one branch of reality to another, as if death itself was nothing more than an illusion. Right now, somewhere in a parallel world, another version of you might already be gone. A car accident, an illness, a random heart failure. In that world, the people who love you are mourning, but from your perspective, you didn't vanish. You're still here, still watching this video, still alive. And that's the puzzle. In a universe where every possibility plays out, is there ever a moment you actually feel the end? Or do you just keep existing in the timelines where survival always continues? This isn't science fiction. It's a disturbing implication of a real interpretation of quantum physics, the many worlds theory. It's not accepted by everyone, but it's taken seriously enough that some physicists openly debate what it means for consciousness. If every quantum event creates branching realities, then every possible death you could face already exists somewhere. Yet you never wake up in those versions. You only ever experience the path where you make it through. So if that's true, here's the question that will haunt us for the rest of this journey. If you can never feel your own death, what does it really mean to die? To even begin to understand how this bizarre idea of never dying emerges, we have to step into the foundations of quantum mechanics. At the smallest scales, particles don't behave like solid, predictable objects. They exist in superpositions, multiple states at once, until an observation collapses them into one definite outcome. This is the infamous measurement problem. Why does the act of observing force the universe to choose one version of reality over the others? The Copenhagen interpretation says that observation collapses possibilities into a single reality. But the many worlds interpretation suggests something far stranger. Instead of collapsing, the universe branches. Every possible outcome actually happens. If an electron could spin up or spin down, then in one world you see up, and in another you see down. Both are real, both exist, and both move forward as parallel branches of the universe. Now here's where it collides with your own existence. Imagine your heart is beating irregularly. In one branch, it stops. You collapse, and that's the end. But in another, you recover just in time. In yet another, medical help arrives at the last possible second. The many worlds framework suggests that all of these outcomes are real, but your conscious experience will only ever continue in the branches where you remain alive, because in the branches where you don't, there's no you left to notice. This is what physicists and philosophers sometimes call quantum immortality. It doesn't mean you are indestructible in the eyes of others. Clearly, in most worlds, people die at ordinary times. It means that from the inside, from your subjective point of view, you never encounter the moment of death. Consciousness always finds itself on the surviving path. It's not that you avoid danger, it's that danger simply creates a fork. In one branch you die, in another you live, and you only ever experience the latter. Think about the implications. Every close call you've ever had, that time you almost crashed, almost drowned, almost slipped on the stairs, in countless other branches, you didn't make it. But you don't feel those versions. You only feel this one. Survival isn't a miracle. It's a selection bias written into the structure of reality. And if that's true, then the one question you may never escape is the most unsettling of all. If you can never feel your ending, what is death? We grow up believing death is the ultimate certainty. Taxes, gravity, and death, the three things nobody escapes. But what if that certainty is only true from the outside, never from within? This is where the illusion cracks. Because if quantum immortality is even partially correct, then what we think of as death might just be a transition we never actually experience. The people around us will grieve. History will record our absence. But for the self, the continuous thread of I am never encounters its own termination. Let's ground this in something visceral. Picture a hospital room. You're lying on a bed, monitors beeping, heart faltering. Doctors rush in. In one version of events, they don't get there in time. The monitor flatlines. Your family cries. That's the branch where you're gone. But from your perspective, you never feel that version. Instead, consciousness flows seamlessly into the branch where the doctors succeed, where the machine stabilizes, where you open your eyes again. To everyone else, a death has occurred. But to you, it's just another close call, another brush with something you never quite reach. This doesn't mean you're a superhero, immune to bullets or disease. It means that for every moment where you could have ended, there exists at least one path where you didn't, and your experience, by necessity, rides the unbroken line of those continuations. It's like a cosmic sleight of hand. The magician makes something disappear, but the trick is that for the observer inside the box, nothing ever vanished at all. Of course, this challenges everything we think we know about mortality. From the outside, lives begin and end. But from the inside, consciousness may be more like an unbroken film reel, skipping over every frame where it would have cut to black. And the unsettling part is how ordinary this could feel. Every miracle recovery, every improbable escape, every uncanny stroke of luck. It's not magic. It's simply the fact that in the vast tree of branching timelines, your awareness cannot persist in the branches where you're absent. But if that's the case, another problem emerges. If you never truly feel your death, if the illusion of finality is only visible to others, then the very concept of mortality shifts. What does it mean to end if you never reach the moment of ending? What does it mean to live if survival is an infinite default? And here's the unsettling thought. If we can't rely on our common sense ideas of death, then maybe we can't rely on common sense at all when it comes to reality itself. To understand why anyone would even take such an outrageous idea seriously, we have to trace the experimental breadcrumbs, because quantum immortality isn't a wild fantasy pulled out of thin air. It grows out of real physics experiments that continue to baffle us. Step 1. The double slit experiment. Fire a single electron at a barrier with 2 slits. If no one looks, the electron behaves like a wave, interfering with itself, creating a striped pattern on the screen behind. But if you observe it, actually measure which slit it goes through, the interference vanishes. The particle behaves like a single solid object. Reality literally reshapes, depending on whether it is watched. And that's where the cracks in classical logic begin. Step 2. Interpretation wars. The Copenhagen interpretation says measurement collapses the wave into one outcome. Reality, in other words, chooses, but the many worlds interpretation refuses to accept collapse at all. Instead, the universe itself splits, branching into parallel versions where every possible result unfolds. You saw the electron go left, another you saw it go right. Neither is wrong. Both exist. Step 3. Decoherence. Critics argued that we never see cats alive and dead, or coins spinning forever in midair. Decoherence explains this. Quantum superpositions don't vanish. They just spread out into the environment, making the different branches unable to interfere. From the inside, it looks like things collapse into certainty. From the outside, the wave function keeps branching relentlessly. Reality only feels classical because decoherence hides the quantum chaos beneath. Step 4. Modern debate. If quantum immortality depends on many worlds, then its strength and weakness are the same. Testability. How do you prove you've shifted into the branch where you survived? By definition, you can't. Every test subject who fails is no longer here to report the result. Every survivor is trapped in their own confirmation bias. The evidence is deeply personal. You live, therefore the theory seems to work. But that's not science. That's subjectivity. And this is why the idea straddles the line between physics and philosophy. We can point to the mathematics of branching universes, to the way decoherence explains the classical world we see, to experiments that defy logic. But we can't step outside of our own awareness to prove which branch we're in, or if we've already hopped timelines 1,000 times just to be here right now. So here's the haunting question. The one experiment no lab can run for you. If we can't prove it to anyone else, what proof would ever count for you? If quantum immortality is even remotely true, then our entire relationship with death collapses. Think about it. We live our lives with urgency because we believe time is finite. We say yes to love, chase dreams, or freeze in fear, all under the shadow of eventual non-existence. But if your consciousness never hits that wall, if you always find yourself waking up in another branch, then death isn't a wall at all. It's a door you never walk through. This changes everything. Mortality has always been humanity's greatest equalizer, the rule that humbles kings and comforts the oppressed. We all die in the end, we say, as if that balances the scales. But if your awareness never ceases, then the scale is broken. Life becomes asymmetrical, uneven. Your thread stretches on while others vanish from your branch. You don't follow them. You only endure. And what is endurance without end? It's tempting to frame this as a gift, immortality without effort. But is it really a gift? Imagine surviving every disaster, every illness, every close call. While others fade, you remain, carrying memory after memory. There's a loneliness in that, a heaviness. Death doesn't just take, it releases. If release never arrives, then existence could become a burden with no exit. Of course, many physicists push back hard against this interpretation. Sean Carroll, for example, has argued that many worlds is not about consciousness but about math. It doesn't magically privilege your awareness. Critics point out that subjective survival bias isn't evidence of infinite continuation. It's just a logical trap. They say, yes, you only ever experience survival, but that doesn't mean you're immortal. Eventually, probability narrows until no branch of you remains. Quantum immortality in this view is wishful thinking dressed in physics language. And yet, even if that's the case, the thought experiment refuses to let go. Because even as a philosophical exercise, it forces us to reconsider what we mean by self. If I only ever experience survival, then my identity is like a flame that flickers endlessly across universes. My death is always real to someone else, but never to me. That gap between outside perspective and inside experience is where the shockwave hits. Here's what it means for us. If the end of consciousness is unreachable, then meaning cannot rest on finality. It has to rest on choice, on what we do with the infinite stream of I am. Whether or not the theory is true, the possibility alone shatters the comfort of inevitability. Because if death is not the ultimate limit, then the true limit may be something much stranger. If quantum immortality lurks in the fabric of reality, then its future implications stretch far beyond philosophy, especially once we bring in the accelerating force of technology. Because what happens when artificial intelligence, quantum computers, and biomedical advances collide with a universe where you might never feel your own ending? Quantum computing itself already thrives on superposition, particles existing in multiple states until measured. These machines don't calculate like classical ones. They explore entire landscapes of possibilities at once. And here's the irony. If the many worlds interpretation is true, then quantum computers are not just exploring probabilities, but branching across actual universes. In one branch, the algorithm finds the answer. In another, it doesn't. But from your perspective, you only ever see the success. Just like consciousness itself may only ever ride the rails of survival. Now imagine medicine empowered by this same principle. Quantum tunneling already plays a role in biological processes like enzyme reactions and DNA mutations. What happens when we harness that to manipulate cell repair, slow aging, or erase disease? In some branches, the treatment fails. But in the branches where it works, where you survive yet again, your consciousness continues. Technology becomes the accelerator, making the odds of survival higher and higher, reinforcing the endless loop. But there's a darker horizon too. If you can never feel your own death, then what about suffering? What about the versions of you who survive catastrophes, not with relief, but with scars? You might not die in the explosion, but you might live with the aftermath forever. Each branch where you go on isn't necessarily a paradise. It could be worse than the death you skipped. Immortality doesn't promise bliss. It promises endurance. And here's where AI makes the equation even sharper. Imagine a future where machine intelligence governs medicine, warfare, even climate decisions. In some branches, it saves humanity. In others, it destroys us. But for you, subjectively, you'll always be inside the branches where you endure. Does that mean you're destined to survive even the end of civilization? Waking up in a ruined world again and again because those are the only paths where you still exist? It's a paradox. The very thing that feels like ultimate safety may actually be the ultimate trap. A universe that won't let you go, no matter how much you might wish for rest. Because what if the real danger isn't dying, but never being able to stop? Let's step back from the physics and land in something closer, more personal. Because this isn't just about multiverses and probability. It's about you. About the choices you make in the quiet hours of your life, under the shadow of what you think is your mortality. If quantum immortality holds, even partially, then every brush with danger you've ever had was never going to be the end from your perspective. Every close call was just another fork in the road, where your awareness skipped into the lane where you continued. Which means the story of your life is built on survival bias at the deepest possible level. You are the version of yourself that keeps walking forward, again and again. But what does that mean for your daily choices? Imagine standing at a cafe counter, deciding between a black coffee or a latte. It feels trivial, but in the branching multiverse, both choices exist. The you who picked black coffee, the you who picked latte, both move forward, which means the real weight isn't in what you choose, but in the meaning you attach to it. If survival is infinite, then significance must come from intention. Otherwise, existence risks becoming an endless blur of arbitrary continuations. And here's the paradox. The people around you, your family, your friends, your community, do see endings. They grieve, they bury, they carry the weight of your absence in branches where you did not go on. So even if your consciousness feels immortal, your relationships are fragile, finite, fleeting in every timeline but your own. That's why love, kindness, and connection matter more than ever. They are the bridges between your infinite path and the finite worlds of others. But there's a danger here too. If you start believing you're unkillable, you might grow reckless, careless with your choices, thinking you'll always wake up in the branch where you survived. But survival doesn't guarantee comfort. It doesn't guarantee joy. You may continue, but in what state? With what losses? With what regrets? Immortality, stripped of meaning, can become a nightmare of endurance. So here's the challenge I want to leave you with as we approach the end of this journey. If you are destined to always wake up tomorrow, then how will you live today? What values will you carry into each branch? What version of yourself will you nurture, knowing that existence itself may have no exit door? Because in the end, whether this theory is true or not, the responsibility rests on the same foundation: how you choose to live in the only consciousness you'll ever directly experience, yours. Picture this: a hospital bed. The room is dim, a quiet hum of machines filling the air. You feel your body weaken, your breath slowing. For your family gathered nearby, this might be the last moment. They'll remember the silence after the beeping stops. They'll grieve, they'll hold on to photographs, they'll tell stories about you. In their world, your ending is real. But for you, consciousness doesn't flicker out. It stumbles, it hesitates, and then it continues. Maybe in a version where the medication kicks in at the last second, where your heartbeat steadies, where you gasp and awaken to their astonishment. To them, it was a miracle. To you, it was simply the next frame of awareness. No fade to black, no final curtain, just the unbroken thread of I am. And if that's true, then death is not the enemy you thought it was. The real challenge isn't whether you'll survive. You always do, somewhere. The challenge is how you live with that survival. What weight do your choices carry? What meaning do you build when the end might never arrive? Immortality without purpose is just endurance. But immortality with intention could make every moment sacred, every connection irreplaceable. So maybe the real responsibility isn't to fear death, but to fear a life unlived. Because if continuation is unavoidable, then meaning must be chosen by you every day. Do you believe this quantum idea changes everything? Or is it just science fiction? Tell me below. Your view might change someone's mind.